From the trenches of motorsports and Gearhead Central, this is RealTuners Radio, your all-motor, boosted, and nitrous-fed hour of power. Now, here's your hosts, the Reverends of RPM, the Faction of Traction, John Bewley, Scott Clark, Bill Fowler, Scott Evans, Mark Dahlquist, Mike Perduto, James Short, Tom Sewell, Brian Barnhill. This is RealTuners Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on? Hopefully everybody can hear me tonight. Think so. Yeah, so how do you like our new intro? Hopefully everybody digs that. Got the new voice guy in there, working on some stuff for 2020. What do you see the video that goes along with that? No big special guest tonight, nothing else going on. We're just going to talk about post-PRI activities and what everybody saw at the show and just kind of have our general happy discussion tonight. We've already started the night off by screaming and yelling at each other, and I've got these guys muted so I can say whatever I want, but I won't talk any smack. These guys know I love them. Anyway, so without further ado, let's bring the guys in. Gentlemen, how's it going?
You just ain't gonna talk any smack because you know
going great.
What'll happen once everybody gets here.
Bewley called me an arrogant fucker about 20 minutes ago. You motherfucker!
Bewley bitch slap.
Hey, to all the listeners out there that are watching right now, if you think Mike Perdeau looks like Duck Jr., give us a thumbs up or let us know for sure.
Can they see me right now?
Not yet, but they're going to in about 20 seconds. Sit tight. I'm working on it.
Like, I'm gonna y'all going to talk about it. We're going to put the shit up there then. I'm glad everybody's got their shirts on tonight at least. Jesus Christ.
I got to go get me a mink coat. Anyone know where I can get a mink coat?
Burlington Coat Factory?
1980.
I was thinking 74.
Kevin Yusubas said the music was weird tonight. What does everyone think of the new intro?
You asking us? I like it.
You're quiet.
Well, I'm asking the listeners. Did y'all like the new intro music today?
Could they hear it? So Mixler probably didn't get it all. I had a problem with Mixler until about a third of the way into it.
Mixler isn't up. It's going. Mixler's going now.
Mixler is what? Sorry, I'm trying my hardest here. I'm trying to get the video screen set up. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
No, I think the video is a terrible idea.
You do? Okay, we can skip that then.
That's okay.
I won't put it up if you don't want.
Well, it'll use up a lot of bandwidth, and that could interfere with the ability to answer technical questions.
Is that your way of saying you don't want to be on video?
Yes.
I like it.
You can always kill your
Stop
camera,
your
Bill.
video. Hold
I know
on.
that.
I can mute his video. I guess I can't. Wait,
Jury
hide
is out on
non-video
the
participants.
intro.
I don't even know how that works. So sorry, we're working on new video stuff, new idea to make this a little more of a video type stream or a live stream in 2020. That's going to be our changes for the holiday season.
You know what I want to know? I want to know if any female listeners are like, hot damn, I need to get with this guy. Or if they're like, oh, shit. A little disappointed.
There's a guy in West Hollywood who's making some comments. Oh, that reference means nothing to you guys, does it? Okay, never mind.
Music is not angry enough.
They said the music was not angry enough?
Music is not angry enough.
That was JL. Why am I not?
Your audio's down, way down.
Yeah, your volume is way down, Mark.
Somebody-
Turn your volume up.
Somebody needs to turn Dawkins levels up.
I feel like we're
Crank it
straight
up,
up
Mark.
amateur houring this right now.
Scott, you have
That's
me turned
Mark's
down. I
deal.
can't turn it down. No, you have me turned down.
I don't have you turned down. Here, let's go look.
Don, we got Rodrigo McMaster listening to us tonight.
Oh God. You still
Mark was
liking that
muted.
trailer,
He's muted
Rodrigo?
himself.
Oh, no one wants to see that. No one wants to see it.
Whoa! What in the hell's big ass head is that?
I'm still working on this. For some reason, this thing isn't liking my. I guess it's because Ring Central took over my monitor or something, or my webcam, but it won't let me display mine. Too bad. We just got to look at Perduto's. You're pretty. You aren't ugly.
Ooh. Damn.
Next time, we're all wearing black shirts with silver chains.
Right.
That's going to be the uniform of the podcast now. I need to get what's the link style on that one, Mike? Is that a herringbone or
Oh, I forget what it's called.
split D twisted 3+1 or some shit?
You know way too much about jewelry.
It used to hang a lot lower before I got fat. Now I need to extend this thing some.
Dude, the drift guy just made fun of your jewelry. I'm sorry. That's awesome. Shit's
Well,
messed up.
He was
His
making
pants are
fun
so
of
tight he
me
can't
for
breathe.
knowing about the jewelry. is what he was
Brian
talking
just
about.
killed it.
Like, yeah, 18
is this
months
any
ago.
better?
Hey.
Is that
There you
Yeah,
go, Mark.
good
Now
job,
we can
Mark.
hear you.
That's it.
okay? Is that
Yeah,
too
Mike,
loud?
just don't gain any more weight or it'll be a choker.
I'm dead.
Uh,
But this is okay. It's not too loud.
no, you're doing good.
Look, that guy over there drinking the Heineken with the tight pants is making fun of my jewelry.
Heineken in tight pants. What are you talking about?
I mean, can anybody that drives a
That's
fucking
9.1%
Miata
right there.
I mean, he drives a Miata. We can't take him seriously. Come on.
Yeah, I just bought a Volkswagen.
Miata.
He's got a Volkswagen Touareg. Come on. I actually was interested in that thing. It's a V6 TDI.
Yeah.
Diesel stuff,
The
man. That's
Miata is
cool.
the only non-turbo car in the house now because the GTO is finally running.
There you go. I mean, we could talk
I
about
can't.
Bewley's project car. No, that would break hearts. That was mean. Someday.
Actually, not the only non-turbo car in the house. So there is sadness over here too.
John, we
Yeah,
just saw
but
a
your
glimpse
car
of
makes-
video coming from Mr. Bewley over there.
We do actually have a listener question if you guys want to do that instead.
Let's do
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
please. God,
our friend Sam Bass from Australia. He's
Sam. You know Sam, right? Vizar's buddy.
Yeah. So he's wondering if anybody knows, and I'm guessing that if anyone does, it'll be Sewell. But does anyone know where you can find accurate manufacturer info on injector discharge angles and patterns? He's working on placement right now on a new manifold design.
It depends on the injector, but most manufacturers have that info. So,
but where can he find it?
Depends on which injector it is. Siemens puts a lot of that data out. Bosch puts that data out. I have it for my stuff. So the answer is it depends on what it is.
So really, we should just hook Sam up with you and say, Sam, you should run Tom's injectors, and Tom will give you the discharge and angle patterns.
Yeah, we could do that, or he could just send me what he has, and if I give him the info, I'd be glad to.
So that's interesting discussion because I didn't realize that was a real concern until I ran into those. Was it the ZR1 or the LSA injectors that kind of come out sideways at a bit of an angle?
I have no clue.
What were the injectors? I've seen that the guys were telling me that they tried to put in replacement injectors, and these injectors, the tip of them, like they kind of jet the spray a little bit off center. I thought it was the LSA.
They were like a 30-degree
injectors.
pattern, but they were like 30 to one side instead of 50.
Yeah, they
15.
were tilted a little bit, and we put them in and they did that. Thought it was a GM factory thing, but I could be wrong. Sewell would know that, not me.
When we tested that stuff in the OEM world, using glass cylinders and everything, that's one thing we tested all the time was, what the spray pattern was, the location, all of that stuff. But I've never paid attention to it in the aftermarket because I really haven't been replacing DI injectors, and that's the only place we really played with it in the OEM that I recall.
Interesting. Now, these are port injectors that were sprayed off a little bit to the side or a weird pattern. But
same idea.
Some that are straight, so there's some that's 15-degree angles. I've actually got some Bosches I bought that were 90 degrees. They came straight out the side. So
yeah.
Someone wants. I'm not going to read Kevin's question.
I'll answer it. Kevin Hulsebus's question. Wanted to know about Scott's Mega Squirt powered hydroponic weed garden. It wasn't weed. The UPS guy was pretty sure it was weed, but I was growing like 3 different kinds of basil. It was good. It lasted for almost a complete year, and then I had to tear it down because we're in the process of moving.
Lettuce.
The devil's lettuce. No, dude, it was really good lettuce. Actually, it was enough to feed 2 of us. We had good greens. In fact, Mary was just asking me about setting that up again. So at the new digs, but we got to. It's all because I ended up having to move. I shut that down last spring. But anyway, no, it's all it is was a what was it? A flood style hydroponic setup in PVC tubes where it would raise the fluid level and had a 15-gallon reservoir that it would just circulate with a little Harbor Freight pump on a timer. It was badass. You can make tomatoes and stuff grow like it's like going. Actually, the tomatoes freaked us out because if you have the nutrients turned way up, literally one tomato plant will grow like an 8-foot string overnight. Like literally, you can sit there and watch a thing grow, and it's pretty nuts. Somewhere I need to post up if anyone's actually interested in that. I have some. I left a camera up overnight and took still images like once a minute, and man, the way the speed that shit grows when you do the hydroponic grow thing. But no, I was not growing weed. There's literally no point in growing weed. It's way too easy just to buy. Carry on. Oh. Did we lose audio?
No, I'm listening to you.
No.
Got it. Okay, no, I'm still showing audio going on. Brian was talking and I lost him. Barnhill, we lost you. There he goes. Now I can hear him.
Yeah, you good? All right.
So anyway, there was that question. Anybody got any like car related questions? What about PRI? Well, you guys, everybody went to PRI. There had to be some. Yeah. What? Who wants to do some show and tell about PRI?
Well, I didn't make it to PRI this year because I just didn't go. So the biggest thing I saw was the car wreck afterwards, and it wasn't even a Mustang.
So did you see his follow-up video to the wreck?
No, I didn't.
No.
That's better than the wreck itself.
Really?
So did you see the 1320 video with they had Boosted throw the banana peel out the window and he spun out?
No.
So
Yes, I've seen
1320
that one.
edited the video. Boosted goes by him and like they're playing Mario Kart. The banana peel comes out the window and that's what makes the car spin out. So then he does this whole video leading up to it, and basically he has a banana peel on the tire of the car, like that's what happened. It's all Boosted's fault. And then basically he looks at the camera and goes, look, guys, shit happens. It is what it is. Like, we all make mistakes. Like, just move on. Like, he owned it. It was cool as shit. Like, he really played that well.
Good.
Now, what happened to Perdito's audio?
I'm here. I'm still here.
You have a delay on video, Scott. When you said you didn't hear me, that was probably a minute after I was talking.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. No, you know what? And here's me looking at the wrong damn screen. You're right. So, whew, this is complicated.
So, question on fuel system requirements on a 2010 CTSV. Goal of a low 800 wheel horsepower range on E85. Would a DSX kit with the stock pumps be enough, or should I go to a return style system like 4 offers?
Yeah, it'll work.
You can push those add-on kits pretty far with the.
Yeah, Stex auxiliary system will do 800 wheel.
Gavin's talking shit, John, just so you know.
Anybody have any thoughts on the Holley low ram intake?
They always have short runners for what my applications are, from what I've seen. But
Yep, that's what
I
people are
went to
saying
go
is
find
the
that
short
dual
runner
injector
stuff.
one, but it wasn't there.
Josh Duncan wants to know if anybody saw the new Iron Coyote block, what your thoughts were on it.
Iron or the billet
Yeah.
block?
No, they had an Iron Coyote there. I didn't see it. I saw it in pictures.
No, nobody actually went and looked at it or has any thoughts on it, though.
Poor guys. Poor
Sorry,
guys.
I was.
Sorry.
I mean, Iron.
I actually went and saw it. It's called the Iron Wolf. I have no idea why it has that name, but it's designed theoretically to support somewhere north of 3,000 horsepower.
I mean, a wolf's the next step up from a coyote, right? So probably where that came from.
Well, and iron does make a better boat anchor than aluminum, so.
Right, exactly.
So did we ever
they-
answer Bill Kovalik's question on the fuel system requirements for his 2010 CTSV? Did we get an answer there? I think I might have stepped on whoever answered that one.
Yeah, Bewley and Sewell both said it would go there.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't skimp on injector. Don't try and size the injectors to the small end of the spectrum.
Exactly, because
Okay.
you're working with the returnless system, so there's no
Yeah.
rising rate. on
John,
the-
Rodrigo's asking about those oilless turbos. I'll put that one in
Right.
your
That was
court.
my next thing I wanted to talk about. Yes.
Man, how? Well, we actually going to give them airtime.
Hey, the answer is when you can't get your turbos to quit smoking because they have oil in them, you just make them without oil. So.
Right.
The answer is, Rodrigo, no. Let's just put it that way.
Ouch.
Well, you gonna get you some of that damn Amsoil grease too while you're at it. Pump it full of that and make it even better.
I thought Amsoil was approved. I guess not. Is that changing?
Nothing wrong with Amsoil. He's saying if you're going to pump grease in your turbo, you might as well make an Amsoil grease.
Right. Or Royal Purple. You can get some of that stuff from Royal Purple too. I hear that works really good too.
Here's a perfect question that we've all been seeing past few days. This will be a great one. Small cubic inch nitrous LS motor, solid roller versus hydraulic roller, best adjustable rocker for LS cathedral heads. Plain and simple, LS, hydraulic, ask Bewley, he'll make power, and you'll do it to like 9,000 RPM hydraulic roller.
And you can drive it all
With
year
stock
long.
rockers.
Yeah.
Stock
So
rockers.
there's
the
actually,
the fastest nitrous 5.3 liter on the face of the planet is a hydraulic roller with stock rockers. And the reality
to me,
of
that's
it
less.
is-
The fact that those guys can drive all over the place. Has Derek Kelly ever had to take his valve covers off?
no, he never takes the valve covers off.
Yeah.
So what you're
I
saying,
just-
John, is don't put adjustable rocker arms on a hydraulic engine.
Do not fucking put hydraulic adjustable rocker arms on a hydraulic motor because it's all about mass in motion, moment of inertia. Because all an adjustable rocker does is add weight in the one spot in the valve train that it doesn't need to be. That roller tip puts more weight over the tip of that valve. And that just makes it that much harder to control it. Because what ends up happening is you go down this rabbit hole of we've got more mass to keep under control, so we need more spring pressure. More spring pressure causes the lifter to work harder, and it can't do its job properly. So then you have to do something with the lifter. And at that point, you might as well just have a solid roller in it. But the key to making a hydraulic roller live and to keep a hydraulic roller stable is to keep the valve train as absolutely as light as possible. So that way it has the ability to go in the upper RPM range and stay stable and not float.
We
What
actually
about
have a question.
trunnion stuff?
We're on.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say we're on episode 108, and someone
108.
actually came up with someone came up with a question that I can answer. Don Abinate. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Abinante, I think. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I was hoping you would tackle that question. Just I want to preface this before Mark goes off. Mark has actually done advanced exhaust design and testing on the dyno for Engine Masters Challenge, and I did it with him, and it's a God-blessed art form. And I'll give you the short answer. Why don't people do much of it? Because it's a huge pain in the ass, but it is an art form. Take it away, Mark.
Don's question, when properly designing headers, how come we don't see 8-into-1 merges more with equal length headers? Was thinking of designing some and wondering why you don't see them much. Well, the problem is area change. And I'm going to preface this by saying most of what I've learned about properly designing a header comes from Calvin Elston of Elston Exhaust. And if you look at Calvin's list of customers, it's every championship racing team of every type of class, from NHRA Pro Stock to NASCAR Winston Cup, sprint cars, Formula One, like road racing, like anyone with a championship has had Elston headers at one point or another. So Elston's big thing is maintaining velocity, because the solid particulate, when we go into reversion, you don't want to bring that back into the engine and contaminate the intake charge. When we have an area change, it's a big change in velocity and pressure, and right then and there you kill the header. So there should not be a primary tube coming off the head that has more area than the cylinder head. So these guys that are putting like a 2-inch header right off the port of an LS, it's wrong. But they say, well, it makes more power. Well, there's other reasons why it may have made more power. But when we get to the merge in the collector specifically, a 2-to-1 merge, say like if you're going to bring two pipes together, has a lot less of an area change because only one pipe is working at a time. So you go from the primary pipe to the secondary pipe. If you have a 4-into-1 merge, there's a much bigger area where all 4 pipes merge, but still only one primary pipe works at a time. So you have this big area change, and there's a reflection and a pulse there. So that's why merge collectors, they get that nice taper down there. You put a choke on the collector. It keeps that area change in the velocity up through that section. By the time you get to an 8-to-1, the collector is so huge that you've just killed anything that the header can do. And equal length means nothing because it's equally shitty. So you're better off, if you wanted to do an 8-into-1, you'd be better off doing a 8-into-4 and a 2-into-1, because you keep your area changes less, or twin 4 and a 2-into-1s. The only reason why you don't see 4 and a 2-into-1s on something like a high RPM Pro Stock or something is because the primary pipe has to be so short, you can't physically build it. So then you end up with a 4-into-1 at the ultra high RPM stuff. But there's a lot more to this. Calvin has a blog called Exhausting 101, and there's a lot of good basic information on that blog. I suggest you look it up. But 8-into-1 is a big compromise.
Let's not forget, an 8-into-1 takes up a lot of room. You have a lot of pipe there, and it's a lot more complicated to make than a 4-to-1 or a 4-2-to-1.
Well, not only is it more complicated, but it doesn't work as well. It's like you're going backwards on everything. It looks cool. I think the one application where it might be okay would be like a single turbo on a V8, but I still think I would like to see a twin 4-to-1 header with a split flange on the turbo. Personally.
Mark, I'll just throw one other thing out. If you look at the Burns stainless site, they make some pretty exotic stuff for interesting applications, and they have pictures of things. I think 6:1 is the biggest one they show. But there's a lot of stuff for particular applications. That would be a good place to kind of look, or maybe post something. Mark,
And I should tell you that Calvin and Jack Burns work very closely together. So a lot of that tech between them is shared back and forth.
Yeah.
Something else to look into is there's a company called High Tech. That's HY-Tech. And they have a really, really nicely done merge collector that you might want to look into. And they also talk about anti-reversion chambers, which is something else that's worth looking into.
Can I just say I'm a little jealous of Brian Barnhill right now? He's laid back in his garage. He's got his chair laid back.
I'm in my house. This is my office. This is my normal commute.
I would also note for the question about the Ford Iron Coyote block, Chris Peters was kind enough to post a link to the story out of Dragzine on the Facebook feed for RealTuners tonight. So somebody looking at that, you can get that information there.
Here's one for you, Bill.
Wait a minute.
Hang on.
Wow.
Hang on. Here's one for Bill. Did anyone see the new Eliminator booth with the new big block Ford? It has 7 cam bearings in it. Has anyone seen anything about that, Bill?
And damn it, the answer was no. I did not see that. Unfortunately, I run an Eliminator block, which is all the more worrisome. Last I saw, one of the changes they were making, because the architecture of big block Ford allows for up to a 70 millimeter cam before you start putting the rods in the middle of it. So they were going to larger cam bores. The idea that they would go to a 7 bearing, that's interesting. Did not see that, so can't comment.
Jeremy Lee asks, does anyone see the Rife sensor with the combined temperature and pressure sensor? This should be a good discussion.
I'm in love with it. I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
For the manifold pressure and temperature? Is that inlet air temp?
No, it's coolant pressure and temperature, one sensor. And it screws right to the factory hole in the head. So there's no adapters, no crap to play with.
I was about to say that Bosch has had that sensor out for a while, but the M10 makes it a pain because you've always got an adapter.
Yes.
So the discussion was if you can get away with running it in the cylinder head, or if it's too turbulent there to run it in the head, or if you kill sensors in the head, you need to have a remote surge tank to run the sensor.
Well, the sensor's designed to screw into the port in the head. That's why it was that was their whole claim to fame, was it screws right into the factory hole. Whether it's good there or not, that's a question for someone over my pay grade.
I've got pictures of all the Rife sensor products that I took at PRI. If I send them to you, okay,
you can share them on your screen, and we can look at them real time. You click the share button there on Ring Central.
They're still on my phone. They're not on my computer where I'm watching.
Send them over
Central.
to me, Facebook style, if you like, or however, and I'll get them up.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay.
All right, quick jump while he's doing that. What about the new Haltech? Let's just go ahead and get it out of the way real quick.
Yeah, is James Short on here?
No.
He's not, is he?
I mean,
he'd be the guy.
Yeah,
well,
the
Barnhill.
nice thing is what the future means for that. For me, I mean, I don't see very many guys jumping on the big guy. It's great for someone that has nothing and is running everything, but it's a lot of IO, and I think the price tag for what it is will be nice. But it's
they still don't have that price point yet. They were asking,
right?
They were asking us.
Yeah,
should be.
So yeah, that's what I don't like. I have an idea where to wind up from what I was told, but
I'm guessing
that's what I'm curious to see. Right, which if you add all that up separately, it's not terrible, but it's when you start paring that down, because now they've got the base architecture, and you can see Andy Wyatt's hand in all of that, the interboard communication.
That's what I wanted to know.
So it's 100%. If you look at all the interboard communication comes from the Adaptronic modular system. That's how it works. So then they took the Haltech wideband and some of the other Haltech stuff that works, fixed some of the noise issues and stuff like that, and this is what came of it. they went with the Halo one right away, which I get why, but that also means that the stuff that most of us are actually going to want to use is going to take 6 months, 8 months, a year or more to get released. So, getting the support on the Elites, that's a good thing, is the firmware is transferable. So scope stuff, loop logging is a big one that I've been beating them up about for a long time. And then open CAN bus, hopefully. I know the R5 supposedly has it, according to Andy, and that should trickle down, because that's the problem right now when I'm bringing in. There's so much CAN bus stuff out there, and there's stuff I want to use that's not Haltech, and I have to basically trick the Haltech into thinking it's a Haltech IO box or something like that in order to bring it in. So it hopefully means a lot more flexibility, and then a lot more smaller parts, so like a smaller PDM with a 4-channel and 8-channel ECU. So I'm just hoping that they don't get too caught up with the Halo one and delay the ones that 90% of us are going to want.
I think you hit a big nail on the head with noise. What is noise going to be like when you have your PDM and your ECM in one box?
So, and that's one thing that get asked a lot. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the seminar where the whatever session with Andy explaining it. From what I understand, there is shielding there, and that's part of the interboard communication. We did it in Honda where we put DI drivers in the main ECU, and it was some problems. Yep. There are ways around it. Part of that is separating those boards out and playing with it from there. So I'm not enough of an electronics guy. I've worked with RF guys. I worked in the radar world for the longest time, and I know it's possible.
I personally have faith in Andy. I think that Andy's influence there, if he's in charge of the board layout and interboard comms, I kind of have a lot of faith in Andy Wyatt, because his YouTube video on coupled noise is effectively what that discussion is badass.
Yep. And that's exactly the tech behind it. So I that's actually not one of my concerns with it. I'm not necessarily concerned about it, as long as Andy doesn't get caught up being Andy. I don't know how to say that any other way, but
deep dives.
He needs to, as long as he doesn't just keep playing with this and it gets pushed as a releasable product. Because I say if the R5 just keeps this development all the time, and we don't see the R3 and the smaller versions, and we don't see the tech push back to the Elites, then that's gonna be the annoying thing, and that's where you get sort of the vaporware conversation and the we've been told these features are coming forever, and I that's what I'm hoping doesn't happen.
I think we'll be okay. I think there's good growth in Haltech world. Bill, I've got these Rife sensors on screen right now. Those pictures you sent me. The first one, so I see fuel to 100 psi, map 4-bar, oil 100 psi, dome 100 psi. That's all in one block. Okay.
Yeah, they built these cool little blocks, and they come either AN or eighth pipe. You can do either one. Without an adapter, like they'll build the block either direction. So you can plumb your whole car with AN line if you want, or obviously the quick connects like everyone likes to run. But they have these little 4 blocks, and they're all run through one harness. So you have one little wiring harness that runs through, and you can get 4 of your sensors out of that one harness. It's going to make for some really clean wiring. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so by the way, for people that are wondering about this, the same team that's representing TDM brakes is doing this. So they were actually showing these in the TBM booth there at PRI. So the same guys are going to be repping those, meaning your same TBM brake dealer will be the ones to look at first for those sensors.
How do you feel about that?
I think I'm about to go spend some of my race team's money.
Right. I like those sensors, man. I'll say that much.
I will say this also for the TBM guys. They were showing much thicker, heavier duty rotors for brakes that will see a mix of track and street use.
Yes.
I think was a responsible move on their part. So
I think so too, because that was one of our
rotor had to be
gripes.
to an inch thick.
Yeah. They actually had a vented one. I mean, which is a concession to the fact that, okay, you're going to do that kind of stuff. You actually need to have a certain amount of material to dissipate the heat. That's just the physics of it.
Good. That's good.
We've got a couple of Mixler questions.
Yeah, back up and grab those, Mark. I saw you had a couple guys on hold there, but this is back to Bewley's area of expertise. If he's still awake with us,
I'm still here just listening to y'all rant about electronics.
So what's
Blake Hughes asks an interesting question here. If a sensor goes bad, do you replace the whole block?
No, sir. The answer is no. There was a snap ring on the back. You could pull a bullet sensor out and go back in.
Yeah. That question, to my mind, can be expanded to our discussion about the new Haltech ECU, because now that everything's in one place, it's great. All that high power stuff is in one place. That's great. If any of that goes wrong, you need to have a complete spare ECU.
That's a good point.
Right.
Ooh,
so
yeah,
on the modular, you could swap out individual boards. So that's, I guess, a possibility. But yeah, that you're not going to do that track side. So that, I guess, unless you're having a common problem. But yeah, that would definitely be something to consider.
interesting concern. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're running, it's an amazing idea to think that you can drive all the high power stuff in the car theoretically, because you can do PWM across, what was it? And Mike, remind me of what the 25 amp on the big ones and 8 amp on the smaller ones.
Yeah, there was on the one plug, I think was there 2 or 4 25 amp?
425
yes.
amp.
Yeah.
Which that's a lot. And he goes, I'm not going to tell you. He said, we're calling them 25 amp, but I believe he said they would go as high as 37.
Yeah. All that's great. But now you have a very interesting single point of failure.
That's a very good point that I never even crossed my mind.
Right. And that's an interesting thing, because that's I don't know how many guys carry spare ECUs. They even the pro drift world, there's not a lot. And they're probably a little lagging there. Even our team, our spare ECUs are the fact that we have spare cars, that every car runs the same Motec. And there's a handful of it, and I know that
on the single point of failure, though, does it really matter? Because a failure is a failure. If an injector driver fails in the ECU, you're dead. If a ignition driver fails, you're dead. If if you have a separate relay board to control this, whatever it is that breaks, if you don't have the spare parts, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
You're
it just
done.
means that your spare is now more expensive if you have an entire spare. But
you only
have
need
to have
one
a
spare.
You
right.
only need
So
one spare instead of
you're
one for
swapping
everything.
one box instead of chasing a problem, I guess. Just hopefully whatever caused your problem isn't going to fry the whole new big.
Oh man, can you guys imagine working at Haltech in customer care? Everything, if the taillights don't work on a car, they're getting a phone call the computer's bad. Everything that goes wrong with a car is going to be computer's fault.
And that's been the reason they've been so locked down for so long. But yeah, I'm not envious of that task.
Jay Albers, I absolutely love the daily dry sumps. They're just expensive, but they're great. I want to go back to the
reply to you.
Yeah, I want to go back to these questions on
Mixler question.
Mark, can you expand on that a little bit?
On what?
The question was, what do you guys think of the daily engineering dry sump pans, and would you upgrade to the air separator? Can you unpack that a little bit? Because it's great to say you love it, but do you mind telling people why? Because dry sump has been sort of an exotic step people don't always get to, but with the existence of factory engines with dry sumps, that's now more a part of reality, especially in LS world. So,
well, yeah, it depends on how many stage dry sump too, because like a factory LS dry sump is a single stage dry sump. It's not, it's not as far dry sump as I would like to go. What I like about the daily is that it uses a billet oil pan, and the oil pump is fixtured in the oil pan itself, so it's a lot more compact. And the scavenge points are integrated into the oil pan. It's a very integrated, well-designed system, and it's easier to fit into the car because you don't have all the external hoses, which are also potential leaks. So it's. I mean, you still have the external pressure hose, but the pickup hoses and everything are kept compact, and the pump is right next to the block there. It's just it's a more expensive setup than say like a Peterson or a Moroso or something like that. The flip side is that the external, like the Peterson pumps, are exceptionally good, and they're easy to to service. So I guess there's up and downs, but if I had the money, I'd go daily without a question.
Mark, what about the guys that have been waiting on Mixler for like 30 minutes to get those questions answered?
Well, I was trying to get to them. Poor guys.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Everybody
keeps interrupting you, so everybody stop. Let Mark talk.
They want to know about the rocker trending upgrades. Which ones? What upgrades are available, and which ones are the best for stock LS rockers? Is the BTR the best trending kit? If anyone has tested the comp BSR rockers, which Beely and I had a short little discussion about that today.
The TK002 from Thule is the best bearing kit on the market today, in my opinion. He uses a 52-100 bearing steel inner race on the trunnion itself, where everybody else is using like 8620, and they can spall real bad after a while. And his TK002 with that actual bearing material for that inner race really improves the wear characteristics of that kit. For something that gets miles put on it and gets driven a lot, the TK002 is my go-to for the training kit. Other than that, is like as far as the bushing stuff goes, the CHE is probably up there. I like the CHE because it removes more mass from the rocker and transfers. They use a bigger diameter trunnion and a thinner bushing, and the bushing rides with the rocker, in motion with the rocker. So, and their oiling is really nice. Their oiling paths are really nice. My experience with the comp BSR has been really good. We've seen some typical high wear with the bushings, like you'll get with the bushing kits, unless the rail is plumbed with force-fed oil. Once you plumb it with force-fed oil, the wear seems to go way, way down. They really, really like being plumbed and force-fed, because that bar has got an oil galley in the middle of it, and then it has a small galley out to each of the 16 bushings on the rail. So each one has its own pressure-fed oil source. And as far as anything goes in an engine that moves, like bearings on the roller for a lifter, if you force-feed it oil, it's going to be, that's the best case scenario for longevity for that part. That's the reason why in drag week cars, I put a 2126 Johnson lifter instead of a 2116. I'm not depending on the splash oiling to keep a 2116 alive, even though there's not really any problems, but that's been seen with that. But I'm guaranteed that bearing is getting oil by using a version of the lifter that has an oil galley built into it to force feed it that oil.
And does it actually have a hole in the side of the lifter where the oil galley is too?
Yes, there's an EDM'd hole through the body of the lifter down to each roller bearing on each side.
Holy fuck, who would have thought?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Randy Ruman's a badass. The 2126 is probably the best lifter for LS, hydraulic roller lifter on the market for an LS right now.
As long as we're talking about oiling, can we go back to the dry sump for just a quick second?
Yeah, knock out that multiple stage question.
Yeah. John Sullivan says, why do you need multiple stages for dry sump? Well, you don't need multiple stages for dry sump. What the multiple stages are for is for oil control. So in an engine that's operating, let's say it's a wet sump engine, all of your oil is draining back through the middle of the engine. It's getting caught up with the connecting rods and the crankshaft, and it creates an awful lot of drag and windage, and it can foam the oil, and it can cause problems with getting the oil to return to the pan quickly, things like that. And then you've got this huge reservoir of oil underneath the crankshaft, which he's getting whipped up and whipped around, and you go around a corner and all the oil goes to the one side of the pan. You go around a corner the other way, the oil pit goes the other side of the pan. Let's say you're in a truck, or a rock crawler, and you're going up a hill at a 45-degree angle or down a hill and the oil's going this way and that way, you don't have very good control of the oil. So when we go to a dry sump, we're actually pulling the oil from the very bottom of the pan. In a single stage would be in one spot, a two stage would be in two spots, a three stage would be in three spots. Now we can keep the pan as dry. There's no oil in the pan at all because there's an external tank that we keep the oil in, and the pump is getting clean, unaerated oil, and it doesn't matter what direction the car or the boat or the plane or whatever. It doesn't matter what position it's in. It still has oil, clean, unaerated oil to the oil pump, so you have steady pressure at all times. Now, if we want to help cut down on the windage, all that oil draining back through the middle of the engine, we can add a fourth stage where we're actually sucking all the oil out of the lifter valley or out of the cylinder heads, so that we aren't even returning oil through the middle of the engine. All the oil that goes up for the valve train and that gets returned on its own line. So as we add stages, we are pulling oil out of different areas of the engine and keeping it. We're controlling where the oil is and how much we want in various places.
Some of these big engines, these high performance engines, there's no windows between pairs of cylinders in the block. So also, if you've got a scavenge stage for each pair of cylinders, then each individual grouping of cylinders is having oil drawn off of it equally. So you're getting all the oil out. And that's why a lot of those dry sumps are, at minimum 5 stage. You've got 4 stages in the pan, 1 stage for each grouping of, each pair of cylinders left and right. And then, a 5th stage off the lifter valley. And some of the big turbo cars are up into the 6 or 7 stages. They've got, they're pulling 4 off the motor, 1 off the lifter valley, 1 for the turbochargers. So,
and also at the same time now, as we start pulling oil from the top of the motor, we can also pull vacuum, and that allows us to do things with the piston and ring package that we couldn't do before without a vacuum pump. So either you can add a vacuum pump, or you can do it with the dry sump. As we start pulling a vacuum in the crankcase, we have even better oil control. We have better control of the oil ring. It just keeps benefiting. There's Greg Breton asks, how far will a road race pan with traps take you where you cut over to dry sump? Well, you can make a wet sump work okay, but a dry sump is going to be better every single time except for cost and complexity. There isn't a situation I can think of where a wet sump would be desirable over a dry sump. That's why you're seeing even production cars, high performance production cars coming with dry sumps now, is because they don't want to see oil starvation when they're being pushed hard,
Now, Porsches, Corvettes, all kinds of things. So not to mention the additional oil volume contributes to oil-based cooling as opposed to just using the water jackets. So that's not a small thing. On our drag week stuff, we're using oil to cool the valve springs. And, like on my external pump setup, which is a Peterson, I have an external oil pump, but I also have 2 external stages of vacuum that we pull off the valve covers to accomplish the vacuum part of it, but also because it helps because of the extra amount of oil we're putting up in the valve covers. Not that we're pulling it back through the pump, but it's just a good place to get it under control. And I use external drain backs.
Here's an interesting thing on oil too. I have found that a good aluminum, this is a wet sump motor, but a good aluminum oil pan will pull more heat out of the motor more heat out of the oil than a big oil cooler will. A well-designed oil cooler. I mean, there's so much area on an aluminum pan, you can really dissipate a lot of heat. So if you're having problems with high oil temps, put an aluminum pan on it. It'll help. Like to the tune of 20, 30 degrees in an endurance motor.
Wow.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. I've seen it multiple times now.
I try and use aluminum pans when I can.
Alex Lond notes that dry sumps, along with typically like road race cars and stuff where lower center of gravity is a big deal, you can get a small triple plate clutch. Suddenly you can put the entire engine and trans a lot lower in the car, which has a lot of benefits too.
Yep. The pan's a lot shorter on a dry sump. overall height of the engine comes way, way down.
I'm trying to make my face go away.
Sorry,
Okay,
I'm
there we
laughing
go.
because I read Scott Evans' comment about the dog left when Mark started talking about the engine, and then the other dog left when I started talking about mine.
I said, because neither one of us has hair dryers.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian Barnhill says this is something he wants to talk about to Andrew.
I mean, it's a controversial topic, but all the EV stuff, the electric vehicle controllers coming out. AEM's got theirs, they announced, and you're seeing more and more about it.
Bosch said they're pulling. Go ahead.
I had an EV controller when I was a kid. It was this little slot car track, and you held this thing in your hand. You mean like that?
That was big news the weekend. Bosch Motorsports said they are, in the next 3 to 4 years, they are pulling entirely out of the EFI controller market and going 100% EV.
Yep, we're seeing more of that. A lot of guys that are historically fuel injected guys and stuff like that. And, Ryan from Rywire, we had a good long talk about EV vehicles, and there's a lot more support for it and quicker at PRI than I think some would have thought. But I know that's one thing that I talked a lot with the guys I was with from Ace Performance, some of the guys that are supporting M-Tron. I think we talked about electric vehicles half the way back. So just curious, I know a lot of guys are against it.
I'm just going to say this real quick. Having a race car with an electric motor is like having sex without sound. You know what I mean? Like, you need that sound to keep you going.
I hear it, but you guys are all about crossing the finish line first, and the drift guy is the one here that I don't give a shit as long as it's the fastest out there.
What do you mean fast?
I can tell you now, we can put a set of earbuds in your ears that will make it so we can replicate that car sound so you don't know the difference.
Hey, I want to know.
I'm already doing that with the Mustang. We all know that.
How would you know if you're the fastest drift car out there? I mean, there's no timer.
You guys are
there's
like
no clocks.
The French judge.
Give him a 6.9.
The French judge.
You guys, come on. That is way too harsh.
That was coming.
I'll wait till the first time I get pissed off at the judges this year. I'll agree with you guys.
Let's not kid ourselves. The way the Europeans run their laws, you pay more and more each year to license an older car. So you do not see old vehicles on the roads in Europe. They're not there because they have structured it to force them all off because they're trying to move everybody to the more efficient, blah, 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 lower polluting vehicles. Therefore, in Europe, the EVs take-up rate is going to happen that much faster. So
I think
that
the
market is not just us, sad as that might be to say out loud.
Well, there's some countries that have already given a timeline when they're not allowing any gasoline engines to be sold. It's already out there. It's already happening, like 2026 in some countries in Europe, I believe.
I think the neat thing I'm seeing too is, and I didn't really think about this, and I don't know why, the guys using them is in a hybrid fashion, taking an old car. I've seen guys take some Porsches and make them all-wheel drive by keeping the gas engine in the back and then adding
that's a good point.
A Leaf motor in the front. And then if you really break that down, you can get some pretty insane performance out of it and still have, that feel. And that's where Ryan from Rywire was talking about. You've got these people that are in New York, LA, stuff like that, where, they drive a Tesla every day because it's easy. They get a big tax break and they're used to this electric car now, and they've seen what they can do with it. But then, they still grew up, wanting that old, Mark I, Mark II Land Rover, whatever. Pick your cool car, your old Porsche. But it just doesn't make sense to have that car in the city. And like, well, can I have both? And now they've got the expendable income to do it. And it's gotten to that point where, you can kind of get that old car character and stuff like that, either by, making it a hybrid and just using it to boost everything, or doing a full EV if you can get by without the engine noise.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
that's like saying Caitlyn Jenner is Woman of the Year.
I mean, I think some of the electric stuff is cool, but
don't get me started on PRI Engine Builder of the Year. Go ahead. Sorry.
Actually,
I mean, we do need to mention the fact that Chevrolet is embracing the hybrid driveline technology, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because Look at what the new ZR1 is going to be. 922 horsepower with e-assist on the front axle. In my opinion, that's an acceptable use for EV technology.
Right. And that's where I'm really excited about is what can we do to supplement this? Like I said, at the end of the day, it's all like as I would really love to have some really neat time attack cars, which, when I drive, that's what I actually do. So I do care about crossing the finish line first. I'm just bad at it. That's why I crew.
You love the big wings.
Time attack is a real deal.
Big wings.
Yeah, time attack is badass.
Time attack is badass. Yeah, exactly.
Matt Campy wants to know about why about the Davis VPS? Are they worth getting, or should a guy save his money or put someplace else? I'm not sure what a Davis. Oh, okay.
Vehicle position sensor.
VPS, vehicle position sensor. Yeah. So it's going to depend on what ECU manufacturers start doing with that data that it puts out. But I really like the idea of a VPS. It's really it's the application of the 5-axis sensor, they call it. It's got 3 axes of we really need to get Davis on here, but I believe it's got 3 axes of accelerometer, your typical G-forces, and then also has the other 2 axes are considered what is that thing? It's an audio gyroscope is what that is. My understanding is it's the implementation of that 5-axis sensor, the same thing that comes in a lot of motorcycle ECUs for stability control. So the data that it puts out in typical Davis fashion. I'm sorry?
Is it yaw and roll that it does as the other 2?
No, and I'm not sure. It's pitch, yaw, and roll are all accounted for in the 3-axis accelerometers, but it's just called the 5-axis sensor. Like if you go out, if you shop around, if you're designing a circuit board, you can find it. It's in phones, it's in ECUs, but anyway, and I'm not. It's not really appropriately named. Those other 2 axes don't add anything other than my understanding is it can just help for more accurate position. But in theory, if you can read and process the data coming off that thing, you can give an instantaneous velocity and position on track from launch at any point in time. In theory, you can derive chassis speed from that and get your own comparative traction control without needing more than one wheel speed sensor, which is slick. Now, there's something like that. Hey, what's up, Gavin? So there's something like that in the Fuel Tech already, where they actually have it on an FT600 where you can derive chassis speed and use that in your traction control strategy. So the VPS is just externalizing that sensor. My understanding is Holley has an interface for it. Haven't played with it yet. Haven't played with it on Holley. Have only used this technology on FT600s on a couple of No Prep Kings cars. I'll leave it at that. But otherwise,
this is what I can add to the conversation about the VPS. That sensor can pick a wheelie up in half a degree of pitch change in the car.
Yeah, truth. To me, that is the only valid wheelie detection
too, which is rotation around those axes.
Yeah. So when it comes to pitch, which is nose up or down, it can sense, and depending on what you put in the table in a Holley for the inputs from the sensor, it can react and execute a control strategy within 1/2 a degree of movement in a car, which I've
been told the same, and I think there's more to it than just the angle of attack, but the chassis rotation. Like it can figure out if it's got enough inertia to continue into a wheelie.
It knows the velocity of the rate of change of pitch, and roll, and you can base your control strategy off of that velocity. So you can actually change how it takes timing out based on how quick the car comes up or down. So you can do a lot with it, but but just from like a movement standpoint, I do know that it can pull timing on as little as half a degree of change. And there's more than a half a degree of change going from ride height to fully extended on a Fox body Mustang. So
the other thing that's a big killer for those vehicle position sensors is the actual data. If you've looked at G meter data and whatnot, it looks like a seismograph. and the vehicle position data is, I wouldn't say necessarily filtered, but it uses multiple points of entry to derive an actual G-force, a pitch, etc., to implement into your power management strategy.
Add Davis to the list of the guys we need to get on here to talk with about that. Because that's
So
my
the
understanding too,
implication
James,
of
is you
that-
end up with not having to filter data, but useful data, more useful data than what comes off of a raw G sensor, right?
Yep.
Yeah, those things, if you read into them in depth, and all this information is probably available on his website, I would assume, but don't quote me on this, but I think that thing is actually encapsulated in some kind of fluid to actually kind of dampen between temperature and vibration and stuff as well. So that's where some of the filtering comes from as well. So
are you saying that single sensor does all that, or is it talking to the wheel speed sensors and
No,
the other
it does
stuff
all that
at
internally.
the 4 points of the friction circle?
Nope, does it all internally. And then has
Yep.
CAN bus outputs or individual analog outputs, a couple of different ways of communicating is my understanding.
exactly. I think that's the reason why it's so implementable into the Holly currently, because I think Holly is currently the only one that actually uses a CAN bus stuff to port every one of those inputs in. And I don't know if they're like faster or slower than the analog outputs, but it soak up a lot of I/O doing the analog, because I think it's got 4 or 5 analog outputs for
The other
different.
5 outputs.
Yeah, it's
right?
5
functions.
analog outputs.
It's,
Yeah.
I think it's actually 6. 3. It's 3 for each axis, and then 1 for velocity for each axis. If I'm not
Looks like
mistaken.
5 on the instructions.
We need to go
but
look
Is
at
it
that.
5?
We're going to have to
So
look that up.
is the control strategy done inside the Davis box, then it is output to the ECU, and that's where, or is it
They
just
leave it up
output
to the
raw
ECU.
data?
Yeah, they leave it up to the ECU
Okay.
because you can write a table in the Holly to decide what you want it to do and how you want it to react for how much input it gets from the VPS. But
I guess compared to
curious
like
to see when the
like in
Haltech
our
guys
hands, we
jump onto the
obviously have all
VPS.
that data and we're looking at it. Our rules ban us from feeding that back to the ECU because they don't want us to do this in drifting, obviously. But yeah, that's what I'm curious is what are they doing that's making this usable by the ECU? Because that's where like you said, just taking that raw data in is really hard on the ECU.
Well,
Yeah,
the
it's a
other
lot of
thing
IOs
too
and
is
a lot of processing.
depending on the ECU, the refresh rate on the analog input isn't going to be quite as fast, potentially, depending on the ECU.
And
Obviously,
that's been a complaint of some of the Holly guys, James, is
You got a
the
250 hertz CAN bus, it'll be way faster than the analog would be.
well,
Some
you
cases-
have digital to analog conversion in the box itself, and then you have analog to digital conversion. So you have some latency there, and then of course transistors reacting, etc.
There were guys complaining about Holly to me that manufactured accelerometers because a number of their analog inputs, it was deprioritized on their sampling rate. And I don't know if someone ever published which ones were which, but that's a good point. And I wanted to add, I kind of can't wait for some Haltech guys to get a hold of that VPS data. I mean, there has to be VPS interfacing. Isn't Patrick Barnhill probably doing this already? Brian, I don't know if you're related to that one or not, but
No, I hear no.
I'll tell you that he'd be a good one to get on. He would be the one to know for sure because he deals with more of the race car stuff in the Haltech realm.
because
But I can say
could
the
see
new Nexus has that stuff built in.
I could see the multi-axis advanced tables. I mean, Haltech pretty much dominates in that world of programmability. I'm curious to see what that crowd can do with that VPS data, as long as it's made accessible to the ECU. I mean, I think everyone pretty much agrees there. I like Holly advanced tables. Don't get me wrong, but
Well, the cool thing too on these new things, it's got a 3 CAN bus deal, and one of them's going to be user programmable. So if you have the CAN addresses for the VPS,
you
which
can grab that
I
data.
would, you can have your data on the CAN bus on a Haltech. So
yeah. That's why.
Scott
That's what I
Evans
was
in
getting at. Because one of the neat things about Haltech is they expose a lot more of the guts than the other guys
Scott
typically
Evans.
do.
Scott Evans in the private chat. Cough. Mtron. Cough. Built in.
Right.
Cough.
God, we got to get some M-Tron. First off, Evans, got to get your car running. He's had a lot going on, so I won't hold it against him.
Yeah, I'm getting closer. I'm getting a lot closer. Yeah. Ordered some more parts.
The stuff M-Tron
now that I'm no longer moving across the country.
Yay.
I'm sure either Nick, Scott, or Ben would be happy to get on, so...
I bet Nick would get on.
I got Corey Willis lined up.
There's a couple of questions to get caught up on if we want.
I was just going to say, I think I got Corey Willis lined up for 2 weeks from now. But and let's get Mr. Davis on here when we can. And then anybody wants to get on from Haltech or M-Tron, I'm totally welcome them on here.
I think it makes sense to have both, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe have them together.
I'll send them a message right now. We'll see.
But that'd be fun.
Yeah. Andy Wyatt would be badass.
I think I'll see Nick later this week at the
list.
shop, so because I work with them on a regular basis. That's who I wrote out to PRI with. Actually, was all the M-Tron US guys.
So there's a question here for John Bewley. Kind of off topic, but John recently posted about a 4-inch stroke crank being not necessary for a sub 1300 horsepower goal. I currently have a setup he spec'd for me consisting of a 5.3 with twin S366s and his twin turbo stage 3 cam. It's strictly race and a 2,600 pound chassis with fuel system to support 1,500. I have a 408 that is almost free. It would be around 10-to-1 compression. What should I do? I wanted to get away from the stock bottom M soon, and this 408 wouldn't cost me really anything. What do y'all think I should do? I'm open to bigger turbos and cam change. The goal is to go 4s.
Run it with what you got there. I did that, not a problem.
Yep, stock bottom end 5.3, twin 366s at 2,600 pounds. Run that thing into the 4s all day long.
Right.
I mean,
2,600 is like that's light.
Yeah,
that's Capizzi light.
Yeah,
might as well be a bicycle.
I mean, Jack Roberts literally just went 495.
It's really funny to be hearing you guys call a 2,600 pound race car light.
Well,
for a street car it is.
When we deal with street cars every day, if it starts with a 2, it's a light car. In my world, if it starts with a 3, it's normal weight, and I don't consider something heavyweight until the thing starts with a 4.
The slips went out today. We went 4 stock bottom end at 3,400 with a stock bottom end 5.3. 2,600. That's giveaway. Let's do that all day long.
I mean, that's the reason why I gave you a stage 3 and a pair of 366s to put on a 5.3. If anything, take the 408, sell it to somebody who wants to build an NA motor that can utilize the cubic inches, because the minute you build it around the 408, the turbochargers get too small on the turbine side, and the balance is all fucked up, and
crank flexes.
Yeah, and the crank flexes and the piston skirts are compromised because they're getting pulled way the hell out the bottom of the cylinder. And
well, that's 4-inch stroke in a stock block unit, a nitrous application.
That's
on my 404, which is 4-inch bore, 401 bore, 4-inch stroke. I didn't have problems with the piston skirts, but I definitely had to replace bearings quite often because of crank flex. It definitely becomes a wet noodle with all that extra throw on it, pulling it and pushing it every which way. It's a lot of extra throw on the crank. So you will go through bearings a lot more with that than you will with something that has a lot shorter stroke to it.
And I think that was the point of John's post the other day, is that it's not that the 4-inch stroke is bad. No one's knocking the 4-inch stroke. It's just that the stock block is not structurally there for it, if that makes sense.
And it's not needed. You don't need – the biggest thing is getting the cubic inches up. The 4-inch stroke puts you into cubic inches because everybody does it in a 6-liter block. So we're going 400 to 408 inches instantaneously. And I had a rash of guys coming at me with builds where they were buying Huron Speed turbo kits and sticking 404s in F bodies with Huron Speed turbo kits with single 7675s on them.
Oof.
Good Lord.
And the balance, and then then they're calling me wanting me to do a cam to fix it. Well, I can't fix that. I can fix a 480 on a 408. I can't fix a 7675 on a 408. Like
Yeah,
the
you can
solution,
put a trailer hitch on it.
right?
You can do twins on a 408 and
Right.
be okay with a 66,
Yeah,
70
no.
something. You know,
My fix for a 76, 75 on a 408 is to have him take it to James and have him put a 5,500 RPM rev limiter on the motor.
Yeah.
That way it's not 3-to-1 on the back pressure.
Or we add a second one.
Yeah, that too. But, it's all about balance. I've preached this for years and years and years. It's all about balance, and it's all about specific output. At 12 to 1,300 horsepower, 5 horsepower per cubic inch is not that difficult to achieve. 4 horsepower per cubic inch is not that difficult to achieve. 4 horsepower per cubic inch at 1,200 overall is only 300 cubic inch motor. So a 5.3 can make, the 5.3 can do 1,300 horsepower on E85 like it is nothing. And there's no need to be into the big displacement engines, that these guys want to get into. But this whole rash lately of people wanting to throw 4-inch stroke cranks and stock blocks and then throw S480s and VS480s and these 78, 75s and stuff on them. There's just no reason to have a motor that big on a setup like that.
And
You know,
can we just go ahead, James? I'm sorry.
I was going to say the one thing that I always get is, well, we want the torque from the 4-inch stroke. I've had a 5.3 with an S485 on it that was lit by 4,000 RPMs. If you want more torque, just hit the up arrow on the boost controller. That's
Yes, sir.
literally all you have to do.
Yes, sir.
Work on the tune-up. Work on the torque converter. I mean, with a PTC 9.5-inch billet torque converter, I can make a 5.3 light a 485 before 3,200. It'll be making positive manifold pressure before 3,200, and I can be at probably 20 pounds of boost by 4.
Yep.
And, it's just they'll make torque if as long as the person hitting the keyboard knows what they're doing. But it's just, that post was all about don't get caught up in bigger is better, because that is the theme of all of hot rodding that has existed since this whole thing has started. Everybody's wanted a bigger motor, bigger carburetors, bigger headers, bigger shot of nitrous, bigger turbo, but you have to package this in a balanced manner when you're doing these turbocharged engines. So
I'm sorry to laugh at you, Billy. I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at Chris Delgado's
I
comments.
saw the exact same thing.
And I forgot I wasn't muted.
That's all right. But, it's just, the goal, you've got to remember
saw
that
that.
when you build a turbo engine, it's a ass backwards process than any other combination on the face of the planet, right? You build a nitrous motor, you build this big naturally aspirated deal, you try and make as much power naturally aspirated, and you supplement it with the nitrous. You build a blower deal. You build this big nasty motor, you put a blower on it, you supplement it with boost, and that's how you get more power. With a turbocharger, you literally pick the turbocharger you need to run, and you build the motor to keep that turbocharger as efficient as possible through its operating range, start to finish. That's how you get the absolute most airflow out of the turbocharger itself. So, that's not necessarily a thought process that has caught on until recently with some people. But the reality of it is with the turbocharger and having the turbine, having that cork in the exhaust that you have to make that thing exhale through, you have to make sure that the primary air pump or the secondary air pump, the motor in the compound system, is keeping the primary air pump as efficient as possible so you get as much airflow off of that as you possibly can.
I mean, really, that's forget turbo, forget anything. Just that balance in general is one thing that I wind up having the same conversation with. And what do you do in the car? What's your design? And that's where we see, road racer drifting guys. Yeah, just like, I can make big horsepower with this, but when it's not balanced, it doesn't work. It doesn't drive that way everywhere.
I've got this road race car that I can only put a 255 tire on the back of it, but I want 700 crank horsepower. Okay, you tell me how that works off driving off turn 3 at Road Atlanta and see how that works out for you.
Yeah, I mean, unless you got 30 grand to spend on aero and another 15 on suspension and yeah.
If you're in a 255 limited tire thing, you're not going to get to do all that stuff anyway. John, I think
actually, surprisingly, some of the rules are pretty broken.
Yeah, I apologize. I got dog noise in the background here. But John, what I think you're running up against is everybody works off of the premise, I can pull the cheapest thing out of a junkyard, and traditional engine building says more displacement works. And then I can buy this, Chinese turbo cheap. So I'm going to get displacement plus cheap turbo, which is why you end up with these unbalanced combinations. And I think you're working the educational process, but you're working against a lot of sort of history with what people are trying to do cheap based on what they already have or other factors, as opposed to, as you say, work from the turbo that gets you to the power level you want and then build around that. So it's a different psychological mindset.
It is, and it's just something you got to break. You just have to break the cycle of bad information.
I think explaining it as the secondary air pump idea, I've never thought of it that way, but that's exactly what it is, and that's what people don't realize is they're like, oh, well, big displacement is good, boost is good, so let's just put boost on displacement, and that's all they think of. The turbo is just providing boost, not that these are two air pumps that need to work together, and one air pump's job is to work with the other.
Yeah, and that's all a turbo engine is, and it's a compound air pump. You have a centrifugal compressor as a primary, which is the turbocharger. Then you have a positive displacement pump, which is the engine. And the job of the positive displacement pump is to keep the primary centrifugal pump in the most efficient area it possibly can to get as much airflow off the wheel as possible.
Yeah,
because you have to balance mass flow with pressure, and as long as you're doing that, because that's the biggest thing. Because a lot of people don't understand that, you can make a centrifugal air compressor make pressure, but it might not necessarily move air. So, the biggest thing is to get it to move air mass, because air mass is what's critical. That's
right, and that's what
molecules in the motor.
They look at just straight boost or CFM or whatever, not
pounds per hour, not air mass, because you can have CFM and CFM can go up and air mass not go up. Boost can go up and air mass not go up. So the biggest concern is putting as much air mass in it to combine with fuel to burn as possible.
Yeah, and that's I guess if we could segue to this, that was actually an interesting conversation that I'm still having, and we can discuss a little bit why after the show. But we basically have a drift car that needs to go up 200 plus horsepower, and that was the question I got asked, and is, hey, why don't we just put nitrous on this thing? And looking at, we can make peak horsepower with nitrous, but then not really thinking about how often does this car is it at peak horsepower, and what about the rest of the power curve and the balance and shaping and stuff like that. And
the drift guys still have the rule where the nitrous bottle has to be like in the containment box that's crash safe and all the other nonsense.
It has to be within. It can't be outside of certain crash structure. They basically don't want it out in an area that's most likely to get collapsed. So putting it out in the trunk, where when you're riding a wall and it's a good chance the trunk could wind up. So it's just making sure it's within a structure that's less likely to be crashed, because we're just more likely to crumple certain areas. And we've got guys like Chelsea Denofa and Von Gittin that we had to make a rule that even if it doesn't upset the car, if you bury the trunk up to the tires, still a deduction, because they were just making the back of the car so flexible. On a S550 Mustang, they would bury the car up to they would almost have the tire in the wall and the trunk just almost straight vertical, and it wouldn't upset the car because of their bash bar design and stuff like that. And finally they made a rule that, hey, no, this just because you can get away with this doesn't mean it's right.
Bumper cars.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's dumb. I tell people that it's awesome. Come out to an event. We're going to be at a bunch this year. It's dumb. It's fun, but monster trucks are dumb too. They're still fun. I wouldn't say no to driving.
They're still fun.
One.
Yep.
You coming to Orlando this year?
Yep. We can talk more after, but yeah, I'll be at pretty much every round.
I like it.
Orlando's gonna
there's
suck, but into May.
There was a question on the YouTube feed. It was a sort of a mechanical setup question. Can you run a cable drive fuel pump off the back of a dry sump pump? This is from Grade 8 Motorsports. The answer I would have to that is I would refer you to Peterson has done pumps with fuel pump drives in addition to the Peterson stuff. Now they can run a Star Machine vacuum pump and add to that a fuel pump drive. I've seen them, couple the fuel pump to it up at the front for pulling off of a front tank. I haven't seen one where they added it to do the cable drive from it. So I would talk to the folks who do the external dry sump, et cetera, pumps and see what they're willing to hang off of them.
The answer to that is yes, you can. The plate that the cable screws onto will bolt right on the back of a dry sump pump, just like the receiver would for the snout of a fuel pump. So they do make plates to bolt on the back to run a cable drive off the back of a dry sump pump. So the answer to that is yes, you can.
The only thing you have to watch out for if you do start running a big mechanical pump is sometimes you might have to step up on the belt size as far as the width goes. I know I was talking to my fuel pump guy, and he said if I stepped up to a bigger pump, I'd have to step up to a bigger or wider belt to accept that, excess load that the pump creates on that cable. So I would assume turning a multi-stage dry sump or wet sump pump for that matter, and a cable-driven fuel pump would be a significant load on that belt. So to keep from snapping belts, mid-pulls, just consult with, the guys that design that stuff.
Yeah, and you'll go beyond a Gilmer and go to a high torque type belt, and then at some point you'll go to,
Yeah, the round tooth UHT or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I know Peterson will tell you that if you're over 4 stages with the cable drive, that they want an 1.5 inch wide belt, not a 1 inch belt. That's their cutoff point. It's 4 stages with a cable.
That makes sense to me because I'm at a 1 inch and I don't have that other stuff. So at some point they're going to want you to do that.
Yeah, they'll let you run. They'll tell you they want. When I talked to them 3 weeks ago about a setup, and they're getting to the point anymore. If it's over 5, they want a 1.5 inch belt on it, or if it's got the cable over 4 with a cable drive off the back, they want a 1.5 inch on it.
So the short answer is talk to your provider and make sure it's a coordinated effort, and that way you have less problems. Packaging a 1.5 is all that much more interesting, and now you got to think about how far the mandrel is off the damper, other things.
And especially with an LS, because a lot of LS dampers are set up to have they've got the gear cut into the hub on the back side of the balancer.
Yeah.
So that can get real iffy on an LS setup if you use a balancer like that.
The ATI has a 25 tooth gear on the back of one of their balancers that they make that you can use for a vacuum pump was primary use they designed it for, but it can be used with a dry sump and a cable drive mount thing as well. All kinds of people make the same thing. It's HTD 8mm cog on it.
Yeah, but it's only it's not wide though. It's not
It's not wide enough.
It's not.
Yeah,
It's only a 20mm wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's close to like 7/8 of an inch or so, because that's what I've got on mine with the ATI hub.
And that was
20mm.
That was the reason why I called Peterson, because this guy, my customer with the 4 or 5 stage dry sump, I don't remember, and the cable drive fuel pump in the back at like 21 gallon a minute. We're going to have to change the front drive. We're going to have to stop using the gear that's on the hub and put a mandrel on it so we can get a wider gear on the front. They want a wider gear on it.
I've got to give a shout out to my guy Bob Ett at AEI CNC. He's the guy to talk to about all that stuff. He can build you brackets, supply you.
Have we confirmed how to
everything you
pronounce
need
his
to
last
do.
name? Is it
I've
Ed?
always said Ett, but yeah, pretty sure it's Ett.
We need to get him on here. That guy has some kick-ass
Yeah.
solutions. He's
Yeah, I
always
can get
coming
him
up
on.
with cool solutions.
Yeah, he does.
I can probably get him on.
And if he doesn't
All right,
have
make it
one, he'll make it for you.
Yeah, he'll
Exactly.
design
right?
it.
I literally 10 different times I've seen him be like, dude, give me a day and I'll whip something up for you. And it always works.
Jared Tucker wants to talk about the BTR stock rocker shaft system. We have not spoken about that, Jared. Yeah, it's a pretty cool little deal. I don't necessarily know what it is you want me to talk about concerning it. It looks to me like it's going to be a little bit better than the comp system because they are capturing the shaft in 3 more places per rocker pair than the comp does, because the comp bar uses the stock rocker stand, and then it only has the 8 bolts to hold it down. The BTR system adds an additional 3 bolts per pair. It's 4 shafts with the billet steel stand, and you use 3 bolts to bolt each shaft to the stand, and then you use the 2 rocker bolts to bolt shafts and stand to the head itself. So you've got 20 fasteners holding shafts to stand, and then 8 holding shaft and stand to head. Does seem to have a little bit more rigidity in the stand and the bar than the comp system does. Haven't seen any dyno results from it to see if there's any, how many more RPM it allows it to turn and things like that yet. But I have seen the Spintron data, and the Spintron data was really nice. It was really promising. So we'll see what they do with it when, how they bring it out and when they roll it out. Hopefully soon.
So, John, what's the threshold from going away from the stock rocker with trunnion upgrade to something like that? What are you looking at in terms of when do you need to go to something like that?
Oh, when somebody wants to get stupid with the RPM.
Okay.
Right now, Jared, therefore, the first release on that is going to be cathedral ports. I don't know what the time frame is going to be for LS3, and obviously with LS7, with the stands made into the heads, I don't know what they're going to come up for a solution for that. So we'll see. The LS3 can be made the same way. It's just the bolt spacing is going to have to be different. But
and obviously the offset rocker and
the rocker will have to be different. But the cathedral port version will work with any cathedral port head, even the aftermarket cathedral port heads, like the Trick Flow and things of those. Define stupid RPM. 8,000. Stuff I'm doing with Jack Roberts and some other guys where we're just, running these motors way up there. If you're considering, 7,000 RPM, trunnion kit, stock bolts, some decent lifters. 7,500 to 8,000 RPM, I'm going to be looking at Johnson lifters and an ultimate RPM spring kit with 3/8 push rods and preferably some ARP rocker studs. And, Jack turns his 4.8, 83 to 8,600 RPM. So we're going to see what we can do with that BTR up there. We'll see if we can go 9. See if I can get a hydraulic roller LS to go 9 and not just go 9 for the sake of going 9. I want to see if I can get it to make power up there and actually do something up there and see what we can come up with.
Well, that's always the point, because torque at RPM means more power if everything.
Well, with the recent rash of people just doing something to see if they can do it, there's to me.
We're not going to say anything about.
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave that with that. I mean, and that's cool. proving something can be done, and that's, that's step one. We prove it can be done. Then, hey, can we do it and it actually be beneficial is the second step.
Out
But
of curiosity, I don't spend a lot of time looking at aftermarket LS heads, but when you get up into the mast things and some of these other stuff, are they building those on the premise that you're going to run some sort of other rocker system, or is everything still built on, LS1, LS3, LS7 rocker architecture to this point?
most of them are set up for the rocker architecture based on the port architecture.
Okay.
So
yeah, every head's going to be a little bit different. So Mast likes to use their own spacing and their own rocker stands. Our haymaker used to use a different spacing and billet rocker arms, and then some are going to retain stock rocker systems.
That's Kevin Simcoe, by the way. Welcome aboard, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked because as you get into aftermarket cylinder heads for more traditional engines, SBC, big block Chevy, big block Ford, Glidden headed, small block Ford, all that sort of stuff, you get into, bespoke shaft rockers. So you've got 8 bolts attaching it because they still have to go back to some sort of, base level architecture. You got 8 bolts attaching the stands to the head, and then you've got 16 bolts attaching individual rockers. And that seems to be where an awful lot of stuff has ended up. And I just didn't know if, the LS, et cetera, all the variations, we're going to eventually go that direction as well.
It just depends. It just depends on how high up in the echelon you go. If you're everybody has got a stock architecture style head, right? Because, Trick Flow 245s, for example, you can literally take stock rocker stands, bolt them on that head and run them. And then you go into heads like the Mast Moses head. Okay. Well, the Mast Moses head has its own bespoke rocker system, has its own valve cover. Frankenstein, they've got their own rocker systems for their heads. The straight jacket head from Mast has its own rocker system. The billet head from Baker and TJ and them up at Baker, it uses the same rocker system as like the GM-DR head. And it's, those two heads are the only head that particular rocker system will work on. So, it just depends on where you're at in the pecking order, how far up the pecking order you go. It's just like anything else, It's in the LS world, there's a lot of more entry-level stuff that uses stock style architecture and that can use stock style parts versus small Fords and small Chevy. But that's just because the LS stuff is so damn good to start with. And they don't need to improve on it for that offering of head, the power level that head can support.
Yeah, it makes sense because they incorporated everything that people learned building small block Chevys over decades.
Right.
To have a bigger diameter camshaft and higher ratio rockers and. So it all makes perfect sense.
Not only that, it comes from a sales standpoint too. I would assume, you have all these millions of people out there modding, traditional stock headed LS engines. There's the masses that could sell, stock style parts to.
Yeah. I mean, I can sell somebody a set of ASCAS 220s, which is a big improvement over any stock style, any stock casting head. And they can remove their rocker gear and put it right on the ASCAS 220. They don't have to go out and spend another $700 to $1,000 on bespoke rocker gear specifically for that casting. So that reduces the outlay for that upgrade, and it allows people to do things more cheaply, which is good.
Sense. Yeah, absolutely. Gavin, your stuff. Where are you with all that stuff?
As far as like which casting?
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, we've had you on before, but I'm the most ignorant person to ask these questions on this show. So I'm just curious: is your stuff still based around stock valve train architecture?
Yeah, I try to keep everything around stock because whether we like it or not, most of the LS people that most of our customer base are budget friendly people. So we have to try to keep it within that. A lot of these guys are really cheap. So as long as we can make something that people can reuse parts or they can swap parts over from another build, the easier it is going to sell it, the easier it is going to be for them as well. So, I don't sell my Haymaker head anymore, but one of the reasons why we stopped selling it is because it made it difficult for us to make it work for these people that are able to swap everything over. Now, I had to end up using custom length valves and everything just so I didn't have to shim the hell out of the spring, and then so people didn't have to run a rocker stud instead of a rocker bolt. There's some companies that still use this same casting, but they'll use a 5450 long valve, and people have to run either a really thick rocker stand specific for the casting, and then they got to shim the hell out of the springs. Geometry is all kind of thrown off and everything, and they're having to run a much longer push rod than they should have to. And it ended up just being too bit difficult for me, so I stopped making it. But that's essentially the goal, is you want to be able to have people utilize stock parts. And so just for it as an example, like what John was saying, the 220s, and all those trick flow castings, you can use the stock rails, which is awesome. One of the castings that we sell, which is an offshore casting, the only thing that we require to use stock rails is the little tabs. We just tell people to grind off the tabs and the rocker stand will sit flush. Our BR3 heads, they're designed to use the stock rocker systems, but if people want to run a shaft mount system or a Yellow Terra or something like that, we always, we can machine the pad to accept those rockers as well.
Cool.
I want to address something here if I can.
Mm-hmm.
On Mixler, Jay Harper asked a question, and I want to apologize a little bit to him for my answer, because reading it looks like I was being short with him, and I was just trying to get my point across. He asked if anyone is familiar with belt drive fuel pumps. He's putting one on his 4.3 project. Will the pump make enough PSI cranking to start? He doesn't want to run a primer pump if possible. And of course, my answer in text, because I'm trying to do multiple things at once, was a belt drive fuel pump. Look up episode 107. We literally had an entire episode on fuel systems with Jeff Stacy from Aeromotive, and belt drive pumps were discussed in depth. Yeah, and I didn't mean to.
I'm kidding.
That was your Scott Clark answer.
Yeah,
right.
I was
Damn.
Fuck you.
I was going to get to his answer online, but the thing is that whole episode was about fuel pumps, and there's very good info over there for him. So I wasn't really trying to
belt drive fuel pumps there, but go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about cable drives, belt drives, surge tanks, front mount pumps, rear mount pumps. That was all in there. So, but anyway, Scott answered Jay's question. It depends on if you have a pressure at the head of the pump, meaning if you have the level of fuel is above the inlet for the fuel pump so that there's positive pressure on it, then you won't need a primer pump. So, but I didn't mean to seem like I was being short with you. I was just trying to type fast. So
way to go, Dick.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Man, what a dick.
Yes. So Mark,
Story of my life, man. That's 80% of the responses I give online are probably received that way, because
you're just an asshole.
It's not churched up any at all. It's the answer and nothing else.
To give a little bit
you're just an asshole, John.
To give a little bit of technical info on my personal car, I've got a 14-gallon, 13-gallon a minute Waterman pump, cable-driven rear, 12 AN feed, wind off into 210s up to the rails. It is gravity fed through a 16 AN from the tank right above the pump. And from the moment I hit the starter, I get about 30 PSI of pressure in about 3 or 4 seconds, give or take.
That's roughly where Will's car is. You crack the key, it rolls the motor over 2 or 3 times, and then she's fired up. She's running.
Yeah. The key to that is a good feed to the inlet of the pump. As long as it's not compromised, you won't need a primer.
As long as it's not straight. To pull anything uphill.
Not pulling uphill, straight feed, not a bunch of bends, not a bunch of fittings. As long as you've got a good head to the pump to the pump inlet, it should be just fine. Oh, hey, Chris Peters, nice of you to take a break off of your Copart searching and join us this evening. Appreciate that.
Saw that.
Yeah, so I spent some time with Jeff Stacy. I got some videos and other stuff of the new 10 gallon per minute stuff, which Scott and I will work out how to post onto the RealTuners site, etc. But he said the exact same thing you guys have just said, is making sure that your tank location, he re-emphasized that dash 16 feed line, so that your gravity feed actually works, so that you've got, weight in the fuel column going into the pump, and then all that'll be fine. It's people that try to plumb something else and they don't do that for whatever reason, then don't know why it doesn't work. So,
And Robert, did we just, is it Etty? Is that where we're going with?
Eddie. Robert Eddy.
Eddie. Okay.
Yep.
He instructed me too. He wants no hose, if at all possible, between the cell and the pump, meaning solid pipe, solid tube, or solid fitting between cell and pump. So there's no suction on the hose or on a hose.
because the hose might collapse, or just because of the length?
That was what he made it seem.
Yes. Yeah, short as possible and solid if possible.
Okay, makes sense.
And Robert, from my understanding, Robert's usually one size bigger on feed versus pump feed versus pump output than other guys are. Like most guys will tell you like a 16 with a 12 or something like that. Robert likes big pump feeds. Like he's not scared to tell you to put a 20 feet on a pump.
Well, there's zero downside of doing that.
Yeah, there is literally, there's no downside to going oversized on the feed.
There's one other thing that's come up in the conversations I have had, which is the vent needs to be sized also proportionally to the feed size of the pump.
That makes
needs
sense.
to be the same size as the feed, basically, because the amount of stuff you're sucking through has to allow for that amount of air to displace behind it.
Makes 100% sense.
Yep. And you'll see that all the time. Guys are running these big things, and then they got that same little crappy vent tube that was based more or less on what was in the car when it was made.
They got their dash 8 rollover vent on top of their cell, and then they're trying to run a 16 feet off the bottom of it.
Yep.
Yeah. Now I will say there is a deficiency in parts for that stuff, because I searched forever on my personal car to try to find a rollover vent that was bigger than an 8.
I don't think there is. I think you just need to end up running 2 or 3 of them.
Right. Well, I've got a 16 reduced down to a single 8 on mine, and it works. So
yeah, you'd have to run a lot of 8s to equal the cross-sectional area of a 16.
Probably at least 3.
Yeah.
Have a row of vents across the front of the fuel cell.
Right.
That's a question I don't think we've answered adequately here. So this question about vent is an interesting one. I have this billet piece that was supposed to solve for that problem with going into it, and I have no idea what it does inside. It probably doesn't even work. But.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm actually going to stick a pressure sensor in my tank, because I run a big 13, 14 gallon a minute pump, and it's got a 12A in return, and this thing's using over 2,000 pound per hour of fuel on a high boost pass. And if that vent isn't adequate, then it should be drawing a vacuum on that tank, I would think.
Yeah, and Delgado just raised a valid point that the vent really only needs to allow enough air in to account for what's the fuel being put into the motor. What's being returned to the tank
is just displacing itself.
Yeah, it's canceling out what's leaving and feeding the pump.
So, on Jeff Stacy's first episode, he kind of argued against that a little bit, maybe somewhat successfully, because he was talking about accounting for heat, expansion, that first draw of the pump starts. You got to fill in the. I mean, he had some reasons for making it slightly bigger.
But the thing of it is it's not going to hurt if it's the same size as the feed going to the pump.
Yeah.
More
that's a minimum
you
guideline,
need
right?
is not going to be detrimental to the performance of the system.
No, right.
So
and James, something to advise on that. Get a since OBD2 came out, there's fuel pressure tank sensors that are like map sensors but with a much narrower range. Those things are awesome. Fuel canister pressure sensors, those kinds. There's a whole bunch of OEM ones out there you don't hear people talking about much, but we've used those for like cabin pressure sensors and stuff like that too. But there's a bunch of, like, you can go get a Toyota 96 Toyota Camry fuel tank pressure sensor for like $22 or whatever at a Napa. They still have them. They are awesome for that application. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'll say another thing too. We're talking about flowing liquid, whereas a vent is actually flowing air. I would assume that air flows through an orifice easier than fluid would. So that's also something to kind of take into consideration too.
Jeremy Lee just posted Bickle has a -12 rollover vent.
Who does?
Bickle.
Makes sense. I know that I ran into that problem. I'm embarrassed to say this out loud, but I did. And I was just talking about a -12 feed into a pump, and then out of the pump it was 10 to the front, but I was having a starvation issue, and I had a small original vent, and the test was because I run a conventional filler on the tank. It's not a fuel cell, and it was just take the cap off the filler and see if that solves the problem, and it did. So bigger vent went in place, solved problem.
Not to change the subject, but speaking of Jerry Bickle, did anybody see the rear end he posted he had on display at PRI this year?
What's the story on that? Is that for like a monster truck, or what the hell is that thing destined for? 11
and a half inch ring gear, all billet modular deal for Pro Mods.
That's pretty.
It was pretty. There is no telling how much power you could put through that rear end.
That and the Carmack piece were sitting. I mean, they were in separate areas, but similar design, similar style, side by side. They are. Yeah, that's some next level crap, man. One day.
I just want a car that makes enough horsepower to need a rear end like that one day.
You're not wrong.
Very rarely. Traction too, man. I think the power isn't going to be the hard part. It's going to be putting it down.
You can call me a wuss on a big tire at that point. I don't care.
So, any other questions before we wind things down? We got to decide what we're going to do these next 2 Wednesdays, you guys. Or we got Christmas and New Year's. Our Wednesday and Wednesday. I was talking to Corey Willis offline, trying to get him on. He's on for the 8th of January. But what are we doing the next 2 weeks?
Well, I can tell you what I'm going to be doing the next 2 weeks, and it's not going to be where I can be on a podcast. So
I'm kind of with you on that.
Before y'all hear from us,
it might be 3 weeks before we're back on. Yep. As far as I'm concerned,
that's what we got to do.
I wasn't planning on doing the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
So
we'll have a nice little vacation.
A holiday hiatus.
Right on. I need to do some rework anyway. I was going to talk to everybody about that while we're here, but we are looking at making some changes. Sadly, I don't want to disappoint you 8 people left that listen on Mixlr, but we're thinking about dropping the Mixlr live audio feed and going strictly video. And it may still be Facebook, but it's definitely going to be YouTube. We're trying to do more video streaming type stuff, and Mixlr way holds us back on the production and engineering side, being able to do much for video streaming. So we're trying to make this more of a live video stream where we can have it set up where we can play more videos, display more pictures, images, that kind of stuff. So we're looking at a move there. I am also
I'll have my
looking
mink coat for 3 weeks.
Right. We need to get you, we need to so they can see your toenails too. But also looking at the possibility of a Patreon-like subscription level to different content. Like, we've been asked about this a lot. Maybe offer some, couple $1 a month subscription to help kind of pay it's getting to the point where the bills are getting a little higher because we have more, we have over 200 hours of content online on the podcast archives. And so that it's getting to where it's like $100 a month to maintain that. And it's not that I'm complaining about it. I mean, I certainly enjoy it, but we're going to keep going. But to monetize that, we're looking at possibly offering maybe some bi-weekly or monthly subscription based, where you can just dial into a conference bridge for a couple $1 a month subscription to help kind of donate to keep things going. We want to provide some content for that donation, so we were thinking about like a hard parts discussion with Bewley, or a tuning discussion with me, Evans, and Mr. Barnhill, or things like that, like a smaller two-way calls, or we can have in kind of like the webinars we did a couple years ago that were so well received. So we're looking at doing some stuff like that to kind of do a little bit of monetization without having to resort to sponsors. So we kind of we're enjoying not having to have ads fly across the screen and things like that. And we had talked about YouTube monetization with ad revenue, and I don't know if we're really sold on that as a group yet. So I think maybe what we'll start doing are some webinar type things, or maybe every 2 weeks or once a month, a private session where we get together. That's a small fee to get into and can get your questions more directly. We've been asked to do that, so we might try that route. But we're gonna try some new things, some more video oriented things for the new year. And I know for me, I'm working on some online courses, that kind of stuff, to make things more accessible. So I don't know if anybody else got input here, things they want to say before we cut out.
No, Merry Christmas, everyone.
I got a little bit of a question for probably Scott Clark. So I got some buddies from school. I actually have to go look up his business name, so I kind of feel bad for mentioning his product at PRI without his business. But there was a 6-bolt LTX block machined out of a factory LT block. And I noticed that Noonan has their billet LT block as well. And so I'm a little dense when it comes to fueling and whatnot, but with the innovations that people have been coming out with as far as the fuel systems to these LTs, I know I forgot the name of their company too, but they have like a plus 65 injector to where now you're not having to run a set of like 16 injectors to make, up to 1,500 horsepower, but extreme DI. But do you guys see the LT, not so much replacing the LS, but let's say if these innovations keep coming up more and more and more, do you guys see the LT being a competitive platform to these engine levels that we're seeing where guys are making 15 to 2,000 horsepower?
I do. I don't know. I don't speak so much for the DI as probably James Short could. But, I know Lingenfelter and those guys are like, look at this. We're making, however many hundred, 1,600 horsepower, let's say, whatever that number is on DI. And then the price tag that it comes with is the only thing that concerns me. If that stuff comes down and gets cheaper, we're already seeing cheap LTX stuff in the junkyard now. I've worked on a car that I believe it holds the quarter-mile record for stock block LT stuff. AES built an engine for, but we did port injection on those, and they responded really well to port injection. I still argue that the money is in a port kit, something that blocks off the DI. But I don't know, James, what are your thoughts on that?
I've actually been working on a kit with somebody that is, when it comes out, will be the most gangster DI can kit anybody's ever seen. It actually, it'll actually take the DI. I'm not going to get into it here, but it's going to be out soon, and it's really awesome, and it's really simple, and it's it's
only $30,000.
Yeah, definitely
to go with your $800 junkyard LTX. No, I'm teasing.
No, the current limitation, in my opinion, is control. And the factory ECU is very capable, but there's so many limitations and bull crap you have to go through to make those things run worth a crap in a drag race, or I'm assuming drag race if you're trying to make 2,000 horsepower, because what goes 2,000 horsepower on a road course? But ultimately, right now in today's current state, where there's nothing really good to control the DI and a port injection system, converting it over to just regular port injection is going to be the best way to make big power with the LT, in my opinion. At least the easiest, anyway. So until you get some of these ECU manufacturers that control the DI stuff, correctly, that's pretty much what we're going to see.
I think we're going to see that over the next 2 years from, EC Masters, Haltech, Mtron. Everyone's working on their GDI stuff. I think the biggest hurdle there is going to be factory support
Injector
supporting fuel pumps and stuff like that. And that's the problem Lynx had. And I remember when it came out, the Link GDI ECU had been out for like 3 years, and they said they sold 4 of them.
Right.
So
Yeah, as it sits now, I think most people can make right around $900 to the tire before they have to drop at least $5,000 on a completely separate fuel system while retaining the existing fuel system that they have.
right.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know this, but the cam and crank trigger system is the same as a Gen 4 LS.
Yeah,
So,
it's the same.
you know, you can literally cap off and pull those DI injectors out and, you know, run a manifold that has port injectors, and voila, now you have an LT based LS motor.
I think there's money in a kit, man. I think there's good money in
Why
a kit.
wouldn't the
Somebody comes out
current
with a block off kit?
Why wouldn't the current Motec and Bosch offerings run the DI?
They do, just nobody's doing it because Motec, you know, I mean,
High dollar.
it's just so.
Well, the other
it's so
thing is
upper
what does that
echelon,
give
and
you?
to
Now you've
buy
got now you've got standalone control, but you don't have any greater fuel capacity. And the real
Volume.
issue is those
Gotcha.
injectors have such a short opening time, just like a diesel engine. There's only a very short crank window of crank angle where you can open that injector. So you're super limited on potential ultimate flow. And then if you do a giant injector, then you're super limited on your minimum injector opening time. So tough
and
to
in my
say.
opinion,
I have
once
something
you
coming out very
actually
soon, it solves all these problems. You guys are going to shit your pants when I tell you about it.
Yeah. And then we're going to see the bill. We're going to crap our pants too.
Nope.
Well,
nope,
the thing is, what I see, once you start introducing a port injector on top of the DI, it pretty much does away with any benefits the DI already has anyway. So, in a way, if you can't get it all done with DI only, I just don't even see the point in even trying to
keep
the mess with it.
Yeah,
and that's why I brought up the injector company that's coming up with, like, I think they're like plus 35 and plus 65% injectors or something like that. Extreme DI. It looks like they're starting to come around on some stuff. I think the new pump design that they have is going to be a belt driven deal.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know why more companies that are doing diesel, you know, stuff aren't kind of jumping on board with these, you know, because they're doing stuff that's supplying, you know, way higher pressure and, you know, fuel volume than what we're doing. So
for real, it really is going to be the diesel guys that jump in and make improvement in the DI front.
Absolutely. And just a heads up, so it's for my buddy that makes that 6-bolt block. I remember his business at it's Taft Industries out of Houston. But they get a factory LT block. They machine the valley cover and everything to be able to put in that small little 5th bolt stud. I believe that's still an 8mm stud. And then the 6-bolt ear on the block is, I believe he upgraded it to a 10mm. Don't quote me on the price, but I think he was saying somewhere around $7,000, including the new block with dart and sleeves and all the machining with, I think it was a stock crank with, you know, Cali's rods and like Weisco or diamond pistons or something like that. But fairly, for the machine work and the parts that are in it, I was actually surprised that it was at that price range, considering everything for the DI stuff is incredibly inflated right now.
Right on. Cool. Well, guys, we're out of time. I'm going to take us out. You guys stick around.
I'm going to bed.
Some stuff to chat about.
I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever holiday you celebrate, Happy, Merry, whatever. Have a great time. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, Mark. Same to you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, Happy New
Happy
Year.
holidays, everyone. We'll see you in 3 weeks, it sounds like.
We should post that, by the way.
We will. Happy holidays. We'll talk to you apparently in 3 weeks. Oh, we got an interesting guest lineup and some video stuff for you. So, should be a good time. Everybody take care. Drive safe over the holidays. We'll see you in 3 weeks.